All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Sit Heads Meditation Club. My name is John. I organize this group. Sit Heads is a sitting and social group for people interested in deep meditation practice. Everything we do is free and donation-based. And if you want to hang out with us, you can find us at sit-heads.com. If you're watching this, there's a new thing. I'm going to try this for the first time. If you're watching this on YouTube, I believe I'm supposed to say something like, smash that subscribe button. Don't forget to like, right? That's a thing I'm supposed to do. So yeah, do those things. Like it, subscribe. We get lots of great teachers doing these talks with us. So if you want to find out when those are dropping, subscribe to this YouTube channel that you're watching this on right now. Okay, that was a fun new experience for me. It is my pleasure now to introduce our guest, the wonderful Mahasi McKay. So Melissa has been practicing meditation since the mid-90s. She has trained in both insight meditation, Vipassana, and Metta meditation in Burma and in the US. I believe that most of her retreat practice has been with the late, great, legendary Sayadaw U Pandita of Burma. She has been teaching meditation since 2003. I did a short Metta retreat with her and just thought she was an astoundingly good teacher. I just thought it was very special, and I really appreciated her wisdom and her style, and thought that she had to come speak to the group. Hey, Melissa, how are you?
Hi, John. I'm good. I'm good. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here. So the way this will work is you and I will have a little conversation, which is not only fun for me, but also plants seeds for the Q&A and helps people think of things they might want to ask. But before we, and then we'll open it up to Q&A. But before we do that, is there anything that you want to say before we just sort of get started?
No, you told me I didn't have to plan anything.
You don't have to plan anything. I'm sorry. I hope you don't feel suddenly.
I will say that I appreciate very much you offering this space for people who are interested in the kind of practice that you are interested in and have done. And that I did look at your YouTube channel, and you've had some amazing teachers. So I'm really happy for this community that you have created. To me, it's great. And I'm going to share these links with my people because I think a lot of what you're offering would be very interesting to them also.
Thank you, Melissa. I would really appreciate that. And I appreciate everything you just said. And, I think, first of all, that's just terrific. And I think it's maybe a nice fit because we don't have a teacher, right? So we are not like a teacher-oriented Sangha or community in the traditional way. So folks who are a member of, if you have a Sangha, or there are folks who you'd consider to be part of your community or part of your Sangha, we can be sort of two great tastes that go great together. We're not doing the same thing as you. We are in some senses like almost a nice support structure for folks in communities like yours, if that makes sense. So yeah, thanks for doing that. Excellent. Before I forget, I always forget. I'll just ask you right away. Do you take one-on-one students?
I haven't been because I do a year-long program on Dana, and I try to meet with them, but they haven't been taking me up on my the people that are in that group it's about to come to an end, and B, they haven't been taking me up on my one-on-one time, so I do have more time. So now I can for a bit.
Okay.
Anyway.
So we are putting together just like a little humble spreadsheet with the names of teachers that we like and have spoken with who take one-on-one students. Would it be okay to add you to that?
Sure, yeah.
Okay. All right, awesome. We can put your contact information or your website or whatever so people can reach you. And would that be fee-based or Dana-based?
Always Dana-based.
All right, so we'll put that on the spreadsheet. Awesome. I'm glad I remembered to ask this time. Thank you. So, all right, on to the fun stuff. So I had a conversation recently with a friend of mine who's a fellow Vipassana practitioner, and he's sort of disillusioned with Vipassana. Like me, he practices sort of Mahasi style Vipassana, which maybe you could take a moment when I shut up, maybe you could take a moment to just briefly explain what that is for folks who might not know, who are watching the video or who are here. But he became disillusioned with it. And the things that he said are things that I have heard before. It had him feel disconnected from his body. It produced a certain intensity and striving. He felt like he needed to ease up, relax, and ultimately he switched to practicing in the style of Sayadaw U Tejaniya. And I feel like that's a story I've heard before. People are like, woof, that Mahasi practice is too much, too hardcore, too intense. And then a common sort of place of refuge, I think, an increasingly common one, is to practice in the style of U Tejaniya, which is much gentler. I love U Tejaniya's style of practice. And at the same time, my sense is that it's throwing out the baby with the bathwater to say that Mahasi practice is like this intense, hardcore thing. My choice has been to figure out, to find the gentler approach, the more receptive approach in the context of Mahasi practice. What do you think about this? Do you think that they're right that just Mahasi practice it's a hardcore thing? There's a sort of warrior approach to it that's intrinsic to it, and that if that's not your bag, go do something else? Or do you think that's maybe a misconception of the practice, or an artifact of the way that it was taught by certain teachers? Or what are your thoughts?
Well, I don't draw a distinction between U Tejaniya and Mahasi. Remember that U Tejaniya's teacher was Shweyu Sayadaw,
Yep.
who was a student of Mahasi, right? And what are they all teaching? The 4 foundations of mindfulness. They're all teaching that with an emphasis on different foundations of mindfulness. So U Tejaniya's technique is to watch the awareness or consciousness foundation. Mahasi has the focus as the emphasis of the body and the breath. And then this added noting technique. And so they aren't different, except for in methodology. And if somebody does find a methodology that does bring up unwholesome mind states, agitation is a good sign of that. Not that we won't be free of agitation in any method that we do, but over agitation. And I have been there, was there when I practiced with Sayadaw U Pandita, who, for those that don't know, teach the Mahasi method. And I needed to kind of back off. And then I also practiced with Bhante Kipapano, who I've done most practice with, more than Sayadaw U Pandita even, actually. And he was also teaching the Shweyu style of, so now called the U Tejaniya style of. So both are good. When you're aware of the mind, you're aware of all of the other foundations, but all of the foundations are good. And then we have what everybody thinks of Vipassana is Goenka style, and Goenka is the emphasis on the sensations in the body. But
body scan.
Yeah. So what's important is awareness, and that you're aware of one of those foundations, and that you're cultivating that faculty of mindfulness. Anything that you're paying attention to, the object of awareness, is not as important because you can watch the mind, you can watch the body, you can watch sensation in the body, and they all have the 3 characteristics of existence. They all have within them. So we can develop insight looking at any of them. Now, I understand your point that a lot of people do say that Mahasi technique does make them strive more, and that's really a Western thing. And you should listen to that. I mean, you should listen to that. And you can keep the good parts of Mahasi, which is what I did, to the development of discipline, with Sayadaw U Pandita in particular. the development of discipline is good, but there is such a thing as over efforting, and us as Westerners, in fact, they're very impressed with us as Westerners in Burma and our ability to put in effort. They're less impressed with our ability to tolerate discomfort. We're just not uncomfortable, and Burma's an uncomfortable place to live. I mean, there's not AC, there's not sealed. I mean, some places have sealed. There's on those monasteries, there's not running water. There's a lot of discomforts. There's bugs, there's snakes, there's animals, there's wild dogs, there's like all of these discomforts. So they're used to bearing that there. So they have great forbearance, great tolerance, and they can have as much effort as we do. But effort and practice needs to be balanced, right? Effort. And so U Tejaniya offers that. And he instructs beautifully on that for people. Yeah. So you're right, the baby in the bathwater thing, I get that point too. And I have heard that people that go right into the U Tejaniya method sometimes not enough effort. Too much effort, not enough effort. My teacher is very balanced. Bhante Kipapano is very balanced in his teaching. So, but I found my way there, having gone through, enough good was happening in my practice when I was frustrated with the Mahasi technique that I still trusted it, but I did have to make adjustments to balance it.
Yeah. And Bhante Kipapano, is he teaching more mindfulness of mind a la U Tejaniya, or is it more, I tend to think of Mahasi practice as sort of whatever's arising to the six sense doors, with a sort of emphasis on body and breath. Which of those is he emphasizing, if that's even a way to frame it, a valid way to frame it?
He'll change it up, because it really is due to our temperaments, what is useful for us, and different focuses at different times will be useful for us. So he did go through a long period of focusing on the mind. Before that, it was the body. And now these days, he's back to teaching in Goenka style. He's doing the body and techniques. Yeah, all his lately have been that, but it's just, which foundation. So. Yeah,
interesting. That's interesting that he changes among them like that. We could talk about this the whole time. Maybe we will. I don't know. So do you think that some of that feeling that you're describing in the West, that association with the Mahasi practice of striving, effort, militancy, do you think some of that comes from U Pandita's style being honed working with Burmese rather than with Westerners? You're saying that he has found Westerners to be more intensely effortful. Does this come from the sort of formative, the sort of formative encounters on Western meditation and insight meditation were sort of the encounters of Joseph Goldstein and Sharon and Jack and their peers with an U Pandita who is relatively new to teaching Westerners, right? So is that where this comes from, or is that a part of it?
I'm not sure, and I don't know how familiar is everyone here with Sadhu Pandita.
It could vary, probably varies.
Yeah. So he was a style of teacher that was very direct, and I appreciated that. He didn't give things in a, he wasn't trying to make you feel comfortable. He was the first teacher that I went to. First retreat I went on was in the United States, but with him. And he has a book called In This Very Life. So he really has this desire to get people to go through these stages of enlightenment in this very life. So when he led retreats, he was very strict about a lot of things. His center in Burma, less so here at his centers, but in Burma, it would really feel like you're going through a training. And there's a lot of benefit to that. I mean, it's really, really great. I was having a very terrible, difficult time on one of his retreats. The conditions there were not quite suitable for me. And I knew my practice was out of balance because I was agitated for 16 days. I never got to a place of calm. And so I left that retreat. And when I left, he called me to talk to him, and he did, because he knew I was an earnest student. And I was telling him why I was leaving. He said so many things that would probably offend people if I told you, but I wasn't offended.
I won't pry.
You can pry. I told him
what did he say?
Yeah, I told him I was worried about my husband. He said it's not for a woman to worry about a man, or a man to worry about a woman. Yeah, things like that. So that didn't really touch me. That didn't reach me at that time. But then there was something that he said, and I was like, I'm having all these problems, and I'm like afraid, and I was crying, and I was like kind of a mess when I was talking to him. And he's like, what makes you think you're special? And at the moment I was like, what are you talking about? I don't feel special. I was offended. Later on, I went back to the United States and I practiced here, and I was able to come like a little bit more into balance. Later on a retreat, those words came back to me at a really critical moment in practice, and I understood what he said, and it shattered something in my consciousness. It was like he had put an acupuncture needle inside me. He pointed right to this clinging of this suffering is happening to me.
Mm-hmm.
And the universality of suffering was then understood. I'm a human. We all are going through this. It's not mine. It's not me. And that was years later. So he's a genius.
He planted a time bomb.
He planted a time bomb and lifted 1,000 pounds off of my psyche by doing so. So not easy, not comfortable to get there. So we can't always look for comfort in our practice or to be pleased by our teachers. I had to put aside things that he said because they didn't work for me. And everybody should always do that with teachers. And my teacher, Sayadaw Ukipapano, he would say that too. And I try to say it regularly in my class. If anything I say doesn't resonate, then just throw it out. And you should always do that with teachers, because they're human beings, and they're not going to say things the way, they're teaching to themselves, really. They're teaching what helped them. That's what I teach. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so that approach that you're describing, or this sort of attitude that you're describing, I think nicely avoids sort of blind guru devotion, which, by the way, is actually an intentional part of certain paths. And this is not to disparage that if it's entered into, knowingly and thoughtfully. But this is what you're describing isn't that, because you're saying, no, discard what worked. This is more of the classic test it like gold in the marketplace, right? Test the teachings against your own reasoning and experience, and which is wonderful, but it also avoids the other extreme of thinking of yourself as like a client of your teacher, your teacher whom you've hired, right? And you expect the provision of a service, right? And so, like, the customer isn't always right when you're working with a teacher. You're not their customer. Right.
Very well said, John. And I have to say that is the difficulty with teaching in the West, and especially when things are being charged for now. I really like the Dana base, because that starts to get really more understood. You start feeling like there's a service there. I have felt when I've taught retreats, longer retreats, an expectation of a kind of service, and it doesn't work well when you're trying to get somebody to an edge in their practice. That's well said, John.
Yeah. Well, I think it's wonderful. Again, like there are teachers who teach, who charge a fee to teach, and I'm not in a position to say what's right or what's wrong. And I understand that the Dhamma has to evolve, or that things are going to shift and change as the world does. But I am glad there are teachers teaching on Dhamma, and I hope that there always are. And so I appreciate that you are.
Mhm.
So thank you for doing that.
I
It's really
trust
beautiful.
I trust it. I just trust it. I see what Goenka has done. Their centers all run on Dana. And then I
Mhm.
was practicing with Burmese people. And I mean, I would do, I don't know, support comes. Support comes in very strange ways because it's a heart of generosity. And it doesn't always come financially, whatever. And I've definitely made choices to not live I'm living in Las Vegas right now. That was a choice out of New York City because it's an affordable place to live.
You're staying at the Palazzo, right?
No, actually, Vegas is a great town to live in. It's
I know
really
we talked about how everyone thinks it's just the Strip, and of course, there's so much more to it than that. Um, okay, this was a great talk about Mahasi practice. I want to ask you one more. I want to throw one more thing at you about Mahasi practice, and then maybe we can move on. And then I want to ask you briefly about Deborah Helzer, Deborah Ratner. You knew her as, just because you had a lovely story about her that I thought it might be nice to share. And then maybe we could talk briefly about Metta. And then I know that there are people here in the live audience right now for whom Metta is their main practice. And I just did think that you were, it was just an astonishingly good Metta retreat, especially given how little time we had. It was a short one. There were just little things about the way that you taught that I thought were so helpful. So maybe we can go there too. But talking about the idea of Mahasi Vipassana practice and sometimes the intensity of it, that, or at least the understood intensity of it, right? As people sometimes understand it. One thing that I found really helpful, and I talked about this with Deborah Helzer actually when I was on retreat with her, and she was really helpful here, is the idea of thinking of it as more of a receptive practice. I know that sometimes you hear about it almost as like your mindfulness strikes the object. A sensation comes up, your mindfulness strikes it. A thought comes up, your mindfulness strikes it. You're like penetrating it as if with a spear. And I got a lot of benefit. I first learned this approach from Marcia Rose, actually, another wonderful teacher, and her assistant teacher, Christina Barre. But they talked about the idea of being receptive, thinking of it as if you were trying to befriend a wild bird in the forest. You can't grab them out of the air. All you can do is put some birdseed in your hand and hold your hand out. And that like went through me like a lightning bolt when they said that in the retreat. And I found that by approaching even Mahasi practice as simply, let's just receive whatever phenomena are presenting themselves to me, instead of like, let's go out rummaging for phenomena, that shifted my practice. Would you say that that is an appropriate approach to Mahasi practice, or is that losing an intensity or an activeness that is meant, in fact, to be there?
No, I think it's appropriate. And I think the important thing to get from Mahasi is precision. That's it. And that's what I got, because a lot of people meditate for a long time and are not that careful with where they're placing their attention. So when you go and practice with Mahasi Sayadaw, or with Sadhu Pandita, and you go and report, you're not allowed in interviews. Like, have you guys done retreats before? Other kinds
people here have, yes.
People here have. Okay, I'm looking at them so I can.
Okay. I know, but the people watching this afterwards won't be able to.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So when you report when you go on interviews in intensive meditation settings, in the West, you're just allowed to say, how's it going? Well, there they have you say, you can say this format of what arose, how you noted it, and what happened to it after you observed it. And that's it. So it's this real wax on, wax off kind of, that's what I always call it, this wax on. You just follow, you don't know why the wax on, wax off. You don't know. Do you guys understand that reference? Karate Kid. I'm getting older, so some people don't. Okay, wax on, wax off. You don't know why. You don't ask questions. You give. But what that does is put your attention out of stories. You're out of stories. You can't make up a story about it. What arose? A thought arose. I noted thinking. What happened to it? It disappeared. not, what arose, a pain in my body. I noted heat, it got stronger, Otherwise, the mind wants to go, I got heat in my body. And I think that's from that thing I did before. And that roots back to my childhood when my mother did this and blah, 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 right? Our mind is always making stories. So there's this wax on, wax off format of being precise with your attention, which is good to do. And then you can take that and then what U says, and relax and be aware. It's a persistence and attention. Striking and going after can make you overshoot, can make a lot of worry and restlessness, which happened to me on in Burma on Sayadaw Pandita's retreat. I was over efforting, and so worry was constantly there, and that was a creation. And nobody told me not to do it until the last day when I was already like way out the door. And one monk came up to me, who now is in Northern California. So if you want this technique, Utuzana, yeah. And you practice with him, right, John?
I did 2 weeks with Utuzana at Tathagata. Yeah.
Yes. So this is
and I plan to go back.
Good. It's available. This technique is available, but you got to take your softness with you there. You got to read some Utejaniya and do what they say to find that balance, right? But he was the one that was there, and he came up to me and he said, do whatever you want. Do whatever you want. If you want to sit, then sit. If you want to walk, then walk. If you want to lie down, there's a bed in the meditation hall. Go ahead and lie down on the bed in the meditation. It was too late at that point, but he saw that's what I needed. I needed some space in my mind, and we need that. And maybe that's what your friend is feeling. So let him have the space and go this way, come back. Too much effort, too little effort. We find the right balanced effort, which is relaxed and consistent, persistent.
Yeah. So for anyone who's curious about this, the monk that she's referring to, Sayadaw Utuzana, is at a meditation center, a monastery in Northern California. It's in San Jose. It's called Tathagata. That's Tathagata, Tathagata Meditation Center. It is a very traditional, my understanding, I haven't been to Burma, but my understanding is that it's a quite traditional, quite authentic Burmese style meditation monastery. I did 2 weeks of retreat there. It was really cool. And so they take retreatants, they do group retreats. They will, if you do a group retreat with them, they will then accept you for self-retreat. It's a cool place. And so Melissa's right. This is available right here in the United States now. That is an U Pandita monastery, right? It's part of the Pandita Rama system, U Pandita's network of monasteries, right?
Yes, and nearly free too.
Yeah, very cheap.
Yeah,
very cheap. So cool. That was again a nice talk about Mahasi practice. I could go on about Mahasi with you forever. I feel like I don't want to just turn this into a meditation lesson for John with Melissa. So let's let me
say one more thing though, because I really think that often people put these, and I saw your talk with Debbie when she was here, and I think she was saying something similar because she's got a very deep understanding of the Dharma. There is a lot of separation in people's minds about methods of practice, but remember, if they are the 4 foundations of mindfulness, that is the same practice. 4 foundations of mindfulness. And that's what all of the people that we've talked about, that's what they practice. And that's what they teach at IMS. It's what they teach at Spirit Rock. It's all the same practice.
And you would say Goenka too?
Yeah. Yes, but he doesn't move away into the other 3 foundations. Yeah. Okay,
no, it's a really good point. I appreciate that. It's easy when you get into the methods and you get technical about the methods. It is very easy to start making it sound like they're all quite different. When they're just sort of variations on each other, or spiritually or thematically quite similar. So I appreciate that pointer. Do you want to would you mind briefly just talking about your meeting with Deborah Helzer? Because even if people don't know who Deborah Helzer is, because she's not like a marquee name who puts herself out there. She really, I think, lives a quiet life and teaches people who find her but she's a really brilliant teacher. My understanding is that meeting her was a big part of what inspired you to get kind of serious with your practice and maybe to go to Burma. Is that right?
Yeah, I met Debbie at a meditation group in Oakland, California, where I first started learning in the 90s sometime. She had just finished her year of practice with U Pandita. And this is relevant, I tell this story all the time in my classes of people that never heard of her. So, and I was very new to meditation. I hadn't done any retreats at all. And she came to this group. It was just my teacher who was friends with like Joseph and Sharon and all of them back in the day. And she was one of the first people to go to Burma. But she didn't become herself a big teacher. She just taught people in her living room in Oakland. And so every Wednesday night we had this group, and Debbie had to leave Burma because her visa expired and she didn't want to. And she had done nearly a year of practice. She was ordained there, so her head was shaved, and but unordained when she came back, so she was in regular clothes. And her being really struck me. She looked like she would look at me with such clarity, and like I had this feeling she could see everything that I was trying to hide from the world at that point, but she could see it, and that there was no judgment. Like I just felt so deeply seen by her. The clarity in her eyes and the brightness and the calmness in her demeanor was, an accumulation of the 12 months of this is available to all of us when we live in the present moment. And that's what she had done, not a lot of thinking, not planning, not doing, just aligning herself with nature, aligning herself. And it's stunning. And I've realized since then, I've seen a few other people in Burma that are practicing for that long, but it's actually a very unusual thing to see somebody after a year of practice. And so I felt very lucky. And I thought at that moment, if that is what this practice does, I want to do it. I want to do it. And it stuck with me ever since. And then we ended up being kuti mates. Kutis are little huts that you live in when I was in Burma. And I was like frantic and crazy in Burma, like, oh, the bugs and the snakes, oh my God, and the spiders are like that. And she was just coolly walking along and fine. She's great.
I mean, those are some big spiders.
Yeah, big spiders, tarantulas and scorpions. It's not a forest refuge. They call it a forest refuge. It's a jungle refuge.
Yeah. You and I talked about this. I was really excited to go to Burma, and I was planning to go to Burma, except for the recent unrest and some pretty dangerous stuff has happened. And but I didn't know about the scorpions or the tarantulas. So maybe I will reassess. Maybe I'll just go to Tathagata. Maybe I'm one of those people who needs to be comfortable, and I'll just go to San Jose.
Well, up in the north in Chaswa Monastery, Michelle McDonald was bringing people there for a while, and I went there. And that's not, there's definitely creatures all over the place, but I just didn't see them. It's more less jungly, more of a mountain climate. So there are places to go.
There was, when I was on the longest retreat that I've done, which was back in 2014, there was a black widow living in my yurt, which was a little freaky. But you do just sort of get used to it. And you're like, oh, there's my friend, the black widow. She's not bothering me. She's in her little web. Her web's over there. I'm over here. Mindfulness does really help. I think it's, the way that you talked about Deborah, it's interesting. I think that in our society, when we think of wisdom, we tend to think about a lot of intellectual activity. And what you're describing is essentially a person who, while a highly intelligent person, chose to sort of let that all subside to be used only when needed, right? And yet just by being present, just by being in the moment, and just by letting go instead of grasping, this person, one of the maybe unexpected outgrowths of this is this feeling of incredible wisdom and perceptiveness. You know, it's amazing how much of that is just not doing a bunch of other completely unnecessary things, and like wisdom just sort of naturally arises when you clear that other stuff out.
Yeah. I saw her say that the perceptive, in your talk with her, the perceptive mind moves much quicker than the conceptual mind. And we gather things with words and concepts, knowledge, that's all based there. But there is a knowing. So sometimes we'll say, think, use your brain means to think, right? So those two are very closely associated with each other in the West. But there is something that is happening in all of us, like musicians or dancers. It's not good to really think about what your hand is going to do, or about there's just listening that's happening, right? And then and knowing, listening and knowing and responding. And I play pickleball, for example, and I can do like some crazy things. And I didn't think, I'm like, how did I do that? I don't even know how I did that. But it's just attention, awareness, seeing, and intention all happening, right? But whether you're an artist or it's pickleball or it's anything, that is the listening to life. That's mindfulness. That's present moment attention. That is a power of our mind that is deeper than conceptual knowing, much deeper than conceptual knowing, much faster, as Debbie said.
Yeah. And if you try, if it can't keep up right, which is one of the reasons why I think you're often instructed in Mahasi style practice. A lot of teachers will tell you, including Mahasi himself, at a certain point, you might find it helpful to let go of the verbal notes, because it won't be able to, that faculty has served its purpose, and you have to leave that raft on the riverbank.
Yes.
Can we talk about Metta just a little bit before we move to Q&A?
Yeah.
Is that okay? So you identify yourself, I think, as a Vipassana and Metta teacher. What would you say? And so for anyone who doesn't know, Metta refers to loving kindness meditation, a practice of intentionally cultivating an attitude or intention of well-wishing toward other beings and to oneself, if you think that's a fair capsule definition. Okay. For a person who is practicing, I guess I'm curious, what do you think the benefits of Metta practice are in and of itself for its own sake? And then what do you think the role of Metta is for a practitioner looking, practicing for insight or awakening, or the sorts of transformation that you think about in terms of the Buddhist path? So what's you could do Metta for Metta, and you could do Metta because you're a Vipassana practitioner and it's helpful for that. Could you talk about the difference between those two approaches and sort of what the various benefits are? Is that too messy a question? Is that all right?
No, but my mind does want to answer in 7 different ways, but I'll pick one at a time.
Okay.
Yeah, so we know that the practices, the 2 wings, wisdom and compassion. And I have really found that you can, through wisdom, find the love side, and through love, find the wisdom side. And they're both valuable. The next Buddha that's going to come is the Metta Buddha, or the Maitri Buddha. And that will be, he will have as the foundation of practice, mostly, really rooted in metta. Metta is an antidote for aversive mind states. So if you're more of an aversion temperament, that has definitely been me, then it's a really great practice. That's why I do the practice. It fills out the heart, gives it breath, puts water in a dry soil of your mind. It's cohesive in its qualities. It helped me to gain where wisdom was developing. There was blind spots to my wisdom because some of it was coming with that judging mind, and Metta made me see that judging mind is not wholesome. It is not the path. It is not beautiful. And it helped to dissolve all of that, helps us to overcome fear in the mind. And then it's used also as one of the 40 of the concentration objects, which in modern day Buddhism, they're not teaching, but that's how the Buddha taught. Pa'aksayada teaches, the jhanas and going through that. So concentration techniques, for those that you don't know, concentration is putting the attention on one object. And the Buddha gave 40 different objects. Metta was one of them. The other Brahma Viharas, compassion, karuna, mudita, and equanimity are the others. And then there's like visualizations of colors, and anapanasati, the breath, is others. Concentration as a development of the mind brings a lot of joy and rapture and tranquility. And it's a little bit of a shame. Like, I wouldn't have had as much trouble in Burma if I had a little bit more of that, So we need it still. And a lot of people come up against that thorniness in their practice because that part of it is missing. So we do still need to develop samadhi in our practice. Tranquility is still important, and balancing. And I'm glad there's teachers out there like Pa'aksayada that will still develop it. Mahasi didn't, though, but he led people through to the enlightenment process. So what Vipassana is, as opposed to those concentration practices, is a study of human consciousness. Why? Because we're looking at it directly. Vipassana means to see nature, or to see in a special way, to see the nature of mind, the nature of emotion. So we shouldn't think about this as a Buddhist thing. It is a practice, the raft, like John said, the raft that helps us to see the human psyche, what causes stress, what are afflictive emotions, what we can do about overcoming this stress. The Buddha said, I teach one thing only: stress, that it's universal, that we all experience it, and the ending of stress. And so that's all it is. It's a psychological system, really. And Vipassana is this strange language to us, but it should become really close to us, because it is the only way to look at consciousness. Doctors don't know how to look at consciousness. Doctors have no measurement, no instrument, no telescope, no microscope to look at consciousness. They can't do it. There's one way to do it. As Matthieu Ricard says, in the first person, our own. But when we look at our own, it's like looking at a skeleton. You got one and I got one. You got a consciousness and I got a consciousness. You have fear and I have fear. You have self-hatred and I have self-hatred. We are all made up of the same thing. So when you're looking at your own mind, you're looking at the universal mind. You're looking at the human mind. You're looking at, so what is that? Rohitasa Sutta is such a great sutta. You should look at the sutta, where it talks about this radiant deva that comes, and talked about being a skywalker. And for 100 years, he went through searching the far end of the universe to find the end of stress, and never found it. And the Buddha said, it is in this fathom-long body that the whole universe exists. So when we're practicing Vipassana, we are studying nature and reality and human consciousness, and why we stress and what we can do about it. So it's near to us. This tradition is not ours necessarily, but or maybe it is for some culturally, but it's near to us, and Vipassana helps us. That's why Debbie was so beautiful. It just brought her into her most beautiful. She was like an elfin creature in nature, and that's what it does.
Otherworldly.
Otherworldly, but really more close to a genuine, beautiful, harmonious. The Buddha talked about living in tune all the time, in harmony. He had that musical analogy, is that what you would call it, in a lot of what he would teach. And that's what Vipassana helps us. We're looking at nature. We are nature. And there's laws. And so the wisdom is seeing, the insights are seeing and understanding the laws of nature. And And then living in line with them.
Well, that's a nice place to switch over to Q&A, don't you think? That's a nice, that just seems like a nice natural stopping point. Thank you so much, Melissa. I had so much fun talking with you tonight. And now I want to let other people have that same fun. So is it all right if we open it up to Q&A?
Yes.
Okay. And I want to encourage people, because I fell short. I didn't ask enough about it, but I want to encourage other people to ask about Metta as well, because I had a lot of fun talking about Vipassana, and I think I short shrifted Metta a little bit. So if any of you are moved to, you might consider making your questions about Metta, or about whatever you want, like live your truth, whatever. Let me know if you have questions for Melissa, and we will begin with Bijan. Bijan, would you like to ask your question?
Yes. Hi, Melissa. Thanks for doing this. So my question is about kind of related to hindrances and concentration in practice. So of course, when we sit down, even it's 30 minutes, an hour, however long, the instruction is practice on the meditation object. For me, it's body scanning. So first foundation of mindfulness. I'm trying to feel, like, what does it feel like? What does the above eyebrow? What does the cheek? What does the neck, like going down and trying to see, like, is there a sensation there? Can I tell what the sensation is? Of course, hindrances like restlessness, or on the other hand, like if it's early in the morning, sloth and torpor come up a lot. And I try to set intentions, and they don't always, the hindrances come up. And so it can be 30 minutes and it feels like, well, I never felt like I really got into the body scan. Like during the whole time there was the sloth and torpor. I never really, like, I was never focusing as much as I wanted to. I'm wondering if you have any advice about sort of dealing specifically with the hindrances, like the restlessness or the sloth and torpor part, the energy sort of based hindrances. Yeah.
Then you're talking in your daily sit.
Yes, I'm talking about the daily practice. So like, yeah, 30 minutes to 45 minutes every day. Yeah.
And it sounds like you've done a Goenka retreat, or?
I've not done a Goenka retreat. I've done a 5-day Vipassana retreat.
Okay. So it sounds a little bit like you don't want the hindrances to be there. Is that true?
Yes, I would say that's true. Yeah.
Yeah. And a little bit of a belief that they're not supposed to be there.
That they're keeping me from reaching my real goal.
Yeah. But when it comes to your goal, it is just simply to be aware. And if sloth and torpor is there and you're aware, you're practicing. It's not to feel or to experience what you want to in that moment. It's to see what is actually there. So you see, when mindfulness is at its best, it is really kind, because you're tired and you're not telling yourself, don't be tired. I'm trying to get rid of this tired. I'm not a good meditator if I feel this tired. You're aware. Sloth and torpor is there, and you're aware. When you walk around in your life and you're driving in traffic, sloth and torpor is there. You don't know it's there often. I mean, maybe you can. You don't know its qualities. You don't know the story that the mind is saying, So we think awareness is supposed to look a certain way, or we're supposed to feel a certain kind of concentration. And certainly when those states come, they are more blissful. One can hold the hindrances at bay. But we want to do that in a skillful way, not with a sense of you're not supposed to be here. So you make peace with it. You can be here as long as you want, sloth and torpor. I'm aware. So that's something you can ask yourself to overcome the self-doubt, which is also another hindrance that is piling on top of these other ones that is there, like doubting that you're practicing right because or even doubting the present moment. The present moment shouldn't be like this. Is an argument that we have constantly in life, right? And so with mindfulness, then you go, am I aware? Yeah, I'm aware. Okay, that's it. I'm sitting and I know I'm sitting. I'm breathing in and I know I'm breathing in. I'm breathing out and I know I'm breathing out. There's heat in my left shoulder, and I know there's heat. And then there's each moment a little congratulations. Look, you're aware. Look, you're aware. It's quite a different thing. And it is a way to lead to wisdom and to insight, is by knowing what's happening when it's happening. And so the mind comes in all the time and says, this isn't supposed to be like this. And for longer retreats, there are skillful ways of working with the hindrances as they're there, but in your daily meditation practice, just fall back on that refuge of awareness. And of course, do you know why those hindrances are there? Because you're practicing them all day long. We all are, because we're not aware. And as soon as we're not aware, hindrances are there. And so we're not going to sit down and now they're gone immediately. It doesn't happen that way. We have to put in the conditions. They're conditioned. We sit down, we see the conditioned mind. We don't like what we see sometimes, right? The object is not important. With mindfulness, what you're aware of is not important. Awareness itself is important.
That is very useful. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bijan. Thanks, Melissa. Stephen, would you like to ask your question?
Sure, thank you. I'm Melissa. Thanks for doing this. My question is around, so you had mentioned earlier about didn't frame it in the terms of arising and passing, but the arising and passing, noticing when something arises, thinking, letting it go, and just the arising of something, passing, falling away, and you just note it, thinking. And done a Goenka practice for a number of years and been with that particular style for 7 or 8 years. We're just going deeply down the rabbit hole of the three characteristics of existence with that arising of phenomena. And more recently, I've allowed things to connect in my mind, to link together, and stories to link together. And what started happening is more insight into why behaviors or things happen, which then allowed me to extend more compassion to people, because for a long time there would just be this why is it like that? Why is this person acting like this? Or not understanding my own projections or things. But once I started to let those connections happen, there was more insight into human nature and why people behave through understanding my own behaviors. And so I'm wondering what place that has, and when that's appropriate, if it is.
Yeah, a huge place. And those are the kinds of insights that we will continue to have. And thoughts are not to be shut out completely. I think I spent a lot of my earlier time of meditation thinking was not good. It's not good to do that. Well, we're trying to discern between wise thought, which is what you're sorting out there, wise thought, because it's leading to compassion for others, leading to an open heart to you. Those are wise thoughts. During intensive periods, some analysis will come in to our practice in the way that you're describing. And then there are times where the mind might get a little addicted to that analysis. It doesn't sound like that happens to you, though. So, and the little that I know about you, I could be wrong about that, but it doesn't sound like it. There are some people, they analyze everything that comes up. And so they need to really shut that off, and just go into that mindful place, aware place, but I wasn't one of those people. But those I can be sometimes. Yeah, I can be where I'm over analyzing and telling stories or whatever. So, but yeah, so we don't have to shut down those analyses of our practice and our understandings of what happened in life. Though we might surrender them during intensive periods of practice, that really will come to us after practice for sure.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you. And no, it definitely gets discursive, and just proliferate sometimes. It's not always insightful. And I think it's just noticing when that happens. So thank you. That was helpful.
And you notice the seduction of it sometimes, huh? When there's where the mind wants to overdo that. And so you have your own wisdom. You can understand. You just did. You understand yourself. You know it's discursive when it's discursive. So, and it's good to say it out loud with a teacher or whatever, but you do have an understanding.
Yeah, overly fixated on solving is another like barrier, I think, sometimes.
Not wanting to know is solving, right? And wanting to conceptualize and understand. Yeah.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Stephen. Thanks, Melissa. Adrian, would you like to ask your question?
Sure. Melissa, thank you very much for being here with us. I appreciate it. My question is related to off the cushion. So I feel that meditation is a component of the path, but I find that for me personally, the greater component is what happens off the cushion, because that's kind of where the practice is actually put into practice. So I'm curious to know, how has your practice off the cushion been strengthened over the course of time? And what has been your greatest challenge off the cushion with your practice?
Okay, that first part I can answer easily. I might have to think about that second part. I think I have an answer to that too. So when we're cultivating mindfulness, what are we doing but cultivating the ability to stay in the present moment? And that in itself is something that is meant to take off the cushion, to be more aware. We can do that when we're doing our dishes, be more just present. We can do that when we're talking to our partners, be more just there. We can do it when we're playing pickleball or playing an instrument. Whatever we do in our lives, we can do with this full present, and it doesn't hurt ever, 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 ever. I mean, it is kind of culturally known, this living in the present moment, live in the moment. We hear it all the time. It's on commercials now even. This is understood that that's a desirable thing to do. But it's a really desirable thing to do because it helps to loosen the weight of stress that we carry when we're doing our work and trying to get to the next moment, when we're driving our car and thinking about something else, so we're not paying attention to the road, when we're, all the things. The mind is just talking. We don't realize probably until we fully examine it that talking is what is creating agitation. It is what's creating depression. It is what's creating anxiety. It is what's creating the feeling of dissatisfaction. When one is fully in the present moment, the mind is guarded against those states of rushing, of getting to the next moment. And then so there's ease and tranquility. And then more so, the understanding that happens in intensive practices of mindfulness is the difference between what they call kusala and ankusala, akusala. Translated often as wholesome and unwholesome. But what that means is that we have particular tendencies in the mind that are afflictive making when we experience them and when we act on them. And when we practice mindfulness, we see the work of and the power of metta, for example, this drive or wish, may I, you, and all beings be happy. And that as a force in the world is something, again, that it never leads to problems, it leads to harmony. We learn that forgiveness is something that is very powerful. We learn that gratitude is something that is very powerful. So people try to enact things in the world, and often they come at it from reactionary mind states, and they end up just kind of perpetuating suffering. There's no changes. If we're talking about a social justice actions, for example, these qualities that we develop will strengthen those actions in the world. Gandhi understood that. Martin Luther King understood that it has to come from love, that these things have to come from love. And we understand that when we see it in ourselves. Oh, love works for me. Love works on my hatred. And then we know, oh, that's the hatred, hating myself or hating. Hatred never ceases with hatred, but with love alone does hatred cease. This is an eternal law. These are the laws. It says in the Dhammapada. Marvin Gaye said, war is not the answer, only love can conquer hate. This is a law, and this is an observable law. And so that's what we observe with mindfulness in our practice. In the world, the hardest thing for me was being a mother. I mean, the hardest, I would say that would be when things were, when I would have more reactions, not be proud of myself or whatever. That became my practice. And that, helped me to live the practice with my son, who was like always in trouble in school, in the principal's office. I've spent more hours in the principal's office. I broke records. I'm in the Guinness Book of World Records for hours most called into a principal's office by their son. So that was a challenge. That was a challenge. That would bring up my reaction. Is that an answer?
Yes, thank you for sharing that vulnerable part of you. I appreciate it.
Sure. What about you? What's the hardest in the world for you?
I would say right now is making sure that I don't make the ambition that I have in the external world translate into my practice, because it can become striving too hard versus just sort of an organic unfolding and walking along on the path. So I think just really being mindful of the two types of ambitions and not commingling the two.
Yeah, that's good that you know that about yourself. And then you can always adjust. And I think it's better to be more of the doer. Like, it's easier to bring people down than it is to bring up the energy. An acting coach said that at one point to a friend of mine. And it's true in meditation also. It's much easier. And nobody is like perfectly balanced in their effort. Everybody falls to one side or the other. And I fall on the overly ambitious side too within my practice. And even when I think I'm not, it'll still come up for me. But that will show up as restlessness, and then you can, come to a balance. And it shows up in my life too. I have to orient towards calm, and some people have to orient towards energy. So those are our temperaments, and they're all very workable. But right effort and it really is a different quality of effort for sure. For mindfulness, it's like the mind is a lighter substance than the body, and then the work. And my teacher said it that way. He said, work in the world is done differently than your meditation practice. Calmer. So I just incline myself before every sit. Do you do this?
Yes, I have to set an intention. And in the beginning of my practice, I wasn't doing that, but I find that when I do set an intention, I feel a lot more grounded.
Perfect. Yeah.
Thank you, Melissa.
Thank you too.
Thanks, Adrienne. Thanks, Melissa. Eve, would you like to ask your question?
Sure. Hi, Melissa. Thanks for being here. Yeah, I came up with two questions all of a sudden. I'm going to ask the one that I'm interested about what you were saying about how, like, we have the shared mind with others. So when you're examining your own mind, it's also like the collective mind that you're seeing. And I don't want to assume what you're going to say here, so I'm just going to ask the question. It's like, how does that extend to a sense of self or not, or no sense of self, or how we are all one? But then is there like, how do you see the distinctiveness of each person versus just being all part of the same?
I wouldn't, but if it works for you to say it that way, I mean, a lot of people that we are all one, I wouldn't quite say it that way, but we're all made of the same stuff. And just like we know we all have a heart and bones and blood and, all those other things in our bodies, it's the same with the mind, the body of the mind, the psyche. We all have those same things. If I pinch me, you don't feel it, right? If you pinch you, I don't feel it. So we're distinct beings. We're separate beings. We have separate life force living out this life, other lives, future lives, mind and body. The not self thing is not that we're not distinct beings. We are separate beings. We are distinct beings. You have to live out your karmic consequences, and I have to live out my karmic consequences. And we are setting karma in this very moment. It's a constant thing. It's an unfolding of causes and effects. That's what karma is. But there's something in our psyche, a psychological belief, which is what gets deconstructed through Vipassana meditation, that there's a self, that there is a solid, unchanging self. So when we have an experience, when we have a thought, I'm like that, my mind wanders, I am a worrier. And while one can know a worrying tendency, when it comes with an image of yourself and your name as something solid inside of you, then that's where the delusion of self is. And what Sayadaw Pandita was pointing out to me when he said, what makes you so special, was actually a very kind thing, even though it didn't come in that package at all. The kindness that I was identifying with my misery. I was calling it my own. And people do this a lot. And it can lead to all kinds of criminal behavior, even when people think they are so bad because they have these kinds of thoughts, or they have this kind of an emotion or a feeling or rage. So this is part of this. This is part of the selfing that we do, identifying with negative circumstances, and I'm not picking on you, but we were talking about in which people identify with the negativity of their mind, the bad, afflictive tendencies of the mind. And everybody could do that a lot less. The Buddha said to relate to all things, this is not me, this is not myself, this I am not. That's really helpful with afflictive mind states. Don't identify with the negativity in your mind. Don't call it mine. It's just a visiting mind state. It's there sometimes and it's not there. And actually, when the Buddha talked about in the Satipatthana Sutta, the 4 foundations of mindfulness, which is where mindfulness practice, Vipassana practice comes from, he said to know the mind affected by, for example, anger as the mind affected by anger. Know the mind not affected by. And I think that's part of seeing you're not always angry. So how can that be yours? It's there and then it's not there. You're sad and then you're not sad. These things aren't solid. So did that answer what your question?
Yeah. Thank you. That was very helpful. And I had another question about emotion, then you got to that, even though I didn't ask it.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Eve. Thanks, Melissa. Is it okay if we do one more question and then wrap it up?
Sure.
All right. Caroline, would you like to ask your question?
Yeah, thank you. Hi, Melissa. Thanks so much for being here tonight. Metta is my main practice, and I was just curious to know what your Metta practice is like. I know there's a lot of different ways to practice it, and I'm just curious about yours.
It changes, you know, what is yours like?
So I usually will do phrases in English. So for my like formal sits, usually I am sitting there with may I be happy. And so I happy, healthy, safe, live with ease. Or it will be towards a person or towards a group of people. I do it when I live in New York City. And so I am walking all around and there are lots and lots of beings all the time, everywhere. So when I'm riding the train, when I'm walking the sidewalk, I call it Space Invaders Metta, and I will do it from my window. And it brings a lot of playfulness into it. I also sometimes will repeat Om Mani Padme Hum. And I find that also has a different flavor when I do it. And so it's sort of a all the time kind of a thing. That's my practice.
Yeah, that's great practice. And I used to do the same when I lived in New York City too. Space Invaders, is that what you said?
That's what I call it.
Yeah, that's good. I mean, how wonderful to space invade with Metta. I mean, the world really, really, really needs it. So that's great. When you practice more formally, like in Burma, they will give, like if U Pandita, for example, really teaches it as a concentration practice. So when we're practicing Metta, we're trying to grow, as John said, that quality of Metta, habituate it in the mind. We're cultivating it, you know, because our mind can be wrapped up in judging people all day, or it can be like, you know, thinking about worst case scenarios or whatever. Instead, this is an uplifting, may I, you, all of us be safe, may we be happy. And that is extremely uplifting. It is also developing that muscle, which all meditations are doing, of taking attention and placing it intentionally. That's a muscle we want to continuously develop. That means we're going to not be, you know, the subjects of our mind, but we will have power over our minds, you can say. So that is a great, is whenever you're intentionally thinking, you're building that muscle, and that muscle can grow and grow and grow and grow. Like we develop any kind of skill, it can become something that we're really skillful at. When you so the other reason for practicing Metta is as a concentration object, and when you do it that way, the way Sayadaw Pandita would teach it is kind of the way it is in the Visuddhimagga, where there's these directions that you can go out, you know, self, everybody in your house, everybody in the city, that's the geographic way, or north, south, east, west, above and below, directionally, or self, people you love, people that are neutral to you, difficult people, all beings. So those were from the Visuddhimagga, 500 years after the Buddha's teachings, where it just came these kind of, and they're great. They're great ways of practicing. But what you'll find with Metta is that people find their way into it. And the way the Buddha talked about it was to develop that quality and to send it out. So there's lots of different ways of doing that. And whoever you're sending Metta to, that is a good thing. And ultimately, what you find is Metta is not a personal love. So anytime you're doing it, you're practicing a universal love. It isn't, I like you, you know, appreciation of qualities or whatever. Though appreciation of people's good qualities can bring up that quality of Metta. It's not a personal love. So when you develop it for one person, then you're developing it for all people. So keep spreading it through New York City, please. I left in 2018, so I'm glad I've got somebody there taking my place.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Caroline.
Let me say one more thing to Caroline. You might try sometime, Caroline, if you do it in your sitting practice, to practice Metta as a concentration object. Just play with that sometimes, because concentration can lead to a lot of quieting in the mind and decisiveness, and just it can shut out the extra thoughts that we have, and really wonderful ways. And so if you ever do that, it gets boring. And that's the wonderful thing about concentration, is like, no matter what, I'm doing this one thing. And that's picking a benefactor or somebody that's easy. Go to yourself, that one person, and then maybe for a couple minutes at the end, go out to all beings everywhere. But that one person, stick with it no matter what. It's like the opposite of what I call Bed Bath and Beyond mentality, where I used to go to the one on 14th Street. There, it's probably not there anymore, and have a heart attack every time I would go in it, because I'm like, oh my God, do I need? I came in for a can opener. I just want a can opener, and there's, you know, all these things, and I get, you know, the indecision. So when we're concentrating, any concentration object is like, takes away that. This is all I'm doing. My mind is coming onto this no matter what, no matter what. And then what happens is the hindrances get really quiet. And that's why the blissful, joyful, rapturous feelings happen. Maybe not in your daily practice, but certainly on retreats. But as you play with your meditation practice, you can try practicing it that way sometimes.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you, Caroline. And thanks, Melissa. All right. So we have come to the end of our little program. Melissa, thank you so much for being here. This was really great, and I appreciate you taking the time to be with us and share with us. Our website is, once again, sit-heads.com. If you want to come hang out with us, attend some of these programs live, do a bunch of the other cool stuff that we do together, you can find us there. And if you are watching this on YouTube, do me a favor, like this video if you liked it. Comment on this video if you have something to say about it. Hopefully something nice, but we'll see. And subscribe if you like this video and want more like it. Melissa, is there anything that you want to say before we wrap up for the evening?
Well, it was nice to be with you all. I appreciate the sincerity in everybody's practice here. I'm really glad you're hosting a community, like I said, that is interested in sincere practice. It's great.
Thank you, Melissa. Well, we appreciate you a lot, and I hope our paths will cross again, and maybe we can lure you back sometime to talk with us another time.
Anytime, yeah.
Thank you so much. And to everyone who's been here with us for this talk, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for your attention. Thank you for your practice. Have a wonderful night, and we'll see you soon.